Welcome back to the Talk It Out podcast. My name's Dan from UK Bike Fit, and today we've got Jen, physio and bike fitter and ex-elite triathlete, who also works for UK Bike Fit. So today we are going to talk about time crunched training. Now this is actually a request that we had. I think this is the first ever topic request that we've had for the podcast.
Yay!
Woo, milestone. So if you are watching this or listening to this and you want your topic request to be considered for our podcast, please leave them in the comments down below, and we genuinely do read them, as point proven today.
Yeah, but we will scrutinise all of the requests.
Yeah, we don't necessarily guarantee that we're going to talk about it. If it's some daft topic like why is running better than cycling, then we're not going to go there, are we? So today is time crunch training. So I do think this is a good topic because a lot of people who ride bikes and want to train and have some sort of event or thing that they're aiming towards, also, unless they're a pro cyclist or have an immense time on their hands,
or win the lottery, don't have enough time or as much time to train as people might think. And it's how to fit your training into your spare time and fit it in and around your life and around your family life and work life, and make sure that you aren't compromising any other part of your life for your training. Because I think a lot of people end up doing that. A lot of people like so much. And essentially training should add joy to your life, not end up you shouldn't have to take some joy away from somewhere else to have that. It should enhance your life.
Yeah, nice. So, and I think a lot of people are the opposite. They let cycling take over because they worry that they're not training enough, not riding enough to make a difference, because they see all the pros riding 30-hour weeks and they think, oh, I've got to do that if I want to make some improvements, when actually you don't. It's nice to have 30 hours a week to ride your bike, but you don't.
I tell you, it's hard work training for 30 hours a week. Exactly,
yeah. So it might not be as enjoyable as some people think being a pro.
It's maybe be easier doing one sport.
Yeah. So, that's the other thing. Other people, people have different sports and exercise that they do other than cycling.
Yeah, and that's great as well, and that will also add to your cycling. If you doing other sports, going to the gym, doing other stuff as well, you shouldn't get rid of that and solely focus on cycling. Being a well-rounded athlete will help. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk about how you can fit your training in if you only have 5, 6, 7 hours a week to ride your bike or to train. What are what you need to consider when you're doing that, and what are the potential downsides of doing that as well. So I think we should talk about first what are the main problems that a lot of time crunched riders come up against, and what we see and hear about from people who have only got time, short amount of time to ride, because we offer coaching, we offer training plans, and obviously we talk about it within our bike fits. And the other main thing that we do is physiology testing, like lactate threshold and VO2 max testing, and a lot of that data or the information that you get out of those tests can help with those athletes that are time crunched and don't have a lot of time to ride. And one of the main things that I find that people struggle with is they've only got a set amount of time to ride, and often that time it just comes up in the week or in the day unexpectedly. I've got an hour, I've got 2 hours to ride my bike. What shall I do? I don't know what to do. I've not planned because I've just had this time come up that's free. And they just get on the bike and then ride. Either they ride easy because they think you should ride easy, or they normally ride really hard because they think, well, I've only got this short amount of time. I've just got to batter myself and get as much out of the session as possible. And you basically end up doing that, rinse and repeat for every sort of ride that you do. You just do the same sorts of rides non-stop. But the one time where lactate threshold testing can help is actually knowing your training zones precisely. Yeah, I think that's key. It's good for anybody who's training, but especially if you don't have much time to train. If you're just kind of winging it and riding, like you say, if you're trying to kind of smash each session, and we see quite a lot of people who, at the minute people are going on Zwift and they'll come in and they just do an hour on Zwift and they don't follow one of the Zwift training plans, and even if they do, it's they've done an FTP test which just doesn't really know what your zones are at all. like that's, I just feel like that's a completely pointless waste of your time. Don't bother doing that at all. But then also they'll just, you know, like pick a route in Watopia and just go like really hard for an hour, be done, and then sort of, you feel great because you've got some endorphins. But then if you do that 5 times a week, there's no way you can actually ride hard at all. So you're actually not ever getting to that top end. You're probably not even getting to your threshold because you're just shattered the whole time. And then also, like, although you don't have loads of time to ride easy, you do need to do a bit of easy riding so you can do the hard riding. So I think people sit in like that middle bit too much. And also if you've done an FTP test and Zwift says you're like FTP's 200, it will also then work out like what your other zones are. But there's no way of knowing that because, you know, me and you could have the same FTP, but one of us could have an amazing aerobic base and then be like have a terrible top end, and vice versa. Like another person could have a really great top end and like really need to work on their aerobic stuff. But you know, an FTP test can't tell you that, whereas a lactate test can. So actually then you can see where you need to improve for whatever it is for your event. You know, if you're doing like Letap or you're wanting to train for crit racing, they're two very different things. But if you can then see where your kind of like weaknesses or what you need to work on, you can actually target your training to that and know that you're training in the right zones rather than just like smashing yourself constantly or riding easy constantly, because neither of those things are going to benefit you in 5 hours a week.
Exactly, yeah. So the pitfalls of an FTP test, and we should probably spend a bit of time talking about that because so many people concentrate and focus on FTP. 90%
of people who come in here tell me what their FTP is.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's a pretty like arbitrary number. And, you know, it's supposed to be this number where, you know, it's supposed to predict the power that you can ride at for an hour. But we could do a whole topic on that. Like,
you never actually ride at that power for an hour to start with in the test.
Right. So if you've ever tried to ride at your FTP for an hour, and you know, not many people can do it for a start because of the test. But I always say like an FTP test is really good at testing how well you can do an FTP test and nothing else. And that's basically it. Like it's not giving you any useful information. And the big problem with FTP and finding your training zones off of it is, like you said, you'll do your FTP test, you'll get this number, and then it'll work out a percentage of your FTP for zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, etc. But not everyone's percentage of their FTP is the same in terms of zones. So my zone 2 could be a certain percentage of my FTP, and your zone 2 will be a certain percentage of your FTP, depending on what type of rider you are. Like you say, whether you're a good base rider or, you know, or not. So it's a poor test, and it's a very poor and inaccurate way of working out your zone 2. So when you combine those two things together, the inaccuracies multiply, and then you're all over the place.
And so many people have come in here for lactate tests, and they've said like, oh, Zwift says my FTP is this, and they've done themselves a little training plan, and some of the rides are like way too easy, and some of them they literally can't finish them. And every single person that I've done a lactate test on has not been able to finish one of the Zwift rides that is in one of their zones, and that's because they aren't accurate zones. So again, if you're using that for your training, you're not getting the most out of it. So it's totally worth investing in, especially if you don't have much time, because then you can actually make sure at the time you have got training, you're spending it doing the right thing so that you're going to get better.
Exactly. Yeah. So if your FTP, for example, is predicting your zone 2 to be higher than it actually is, then your zone 2 rides that you think you're doing might actually be in zone 3, in which case your body's accumulating blood lactate through the ride. You finish that ride and you've accumulated this fatigue, when in theory, if you're doing a zone 2 ride, you shouldn't be accumulating fatigue. You should be basically, you know, pretty relaxed on the bike. And then you come to the next ride and do the same again. You accumulate fatigue again and again and again, and it just builds and builds and builds until you get to, I don't know, a couple of weeks down the line, and you think, wow, I feel really, really tired and fatigued, and I don't really want to train today. but I've only done zone 2. I've only done all this zone 2. Like, why am I so fatigued? That's because you're not riding in zone 2.
Yeah, and essentially you've also, because you've not ridden zone 2, you've not done any benefit for your aerobic base. So if you're going to do like some big long event, actually you've not benefited yourself there either. But you've also not benefited your top end and like your VO2 and your like anaerobic threshold work, because you've just ridden like in that sort of middle ground where you just get the least gains out of. And yeah, I mean, for example, so I've never done an FTP test on Zwift, but I used to do lots of lactate profiling when I was elite, and my workouts on Zwift, I've never done any of like the collection ones. I would always make them for whatever my coach said I needed to do off what my lactate thresholds were. So Zwift like has given me an FTP based on the years and years that I've ridden like all these different workouts. And then since I retired, I've like looked at some of their workouts, and honestly, for the FTP that's given me, some of them like there's no way that I could do them. They just look absolutely like savage. And then yeah, some of them I'm just like, well, I would never do that. That's so easy. And that's just because it's so wrong for my zones, and it's got years and years of me actually working at my like threshold and VO2 max and stuff, and I've got all of those things saved. But the data that has managed to draw from that, like I tried to do this workout last year that was like it was meant to be a VO2 workout, and I was literally like absolutely dying. Like it was the hardest thing that I've ever done, and it was just completely wrong. Like there was no way, and just because I wanted to do something different. But it was just like wild, the numbers that it comes out with. And again, that's not a efficient way to train. It's not effective. It wasn't doing anything.
No. Yeah. And I guess so. I'll not crap on FTP tests too much, because I think FTP tests to work out training zones is an awful way to work out training zones, but it just seems to have been adopted probably because of Zwift. Like that's how Zwift works, so everyone thinks that's how it should.
Yeah, it's just, you know, they've done great in their marketing.
Yeah.
And Zwift is great for workouts. Like, if you know what your zones are, it's great to plug it in there. Yeah,
exactly. But you know, sometimes if you do an FTP test, it's another test or a predictor of fitness.
Yeah.
And to use it in that way is probably like the right way to use it.
Yeah.
If you do want to test your progress easily and quickly, that's fine. But don't use it to work out your training zones.
Yeah.
So this is especially relevant for time crunched riders and cyclists. For what we've just said. So if you only got 5 or 6 hours a week to ride, and you're not riding in the right zone or in the zone that you think you're riding in, then that time spent in that zone is partially wasted. Or that time spent doing that workout is partially wasted. Yeah. So when you've only got 5 or 6 hours a week, you can't afford to waste any riding time. Yeah. Your riding time is really precious, and you've got to make the most out of every minute. So that's where knowing your exact lactate thresholds can really help set your training zones and make your rides effective and worthwhile, and you're not wasting time. I hear a lot of people say, I'm not sure about this lactate threshold testing. I don't think I ride enough. I'm not good enough. Yeah, people don't think they're good enough, which is total rubbish. You don't need to be any kind of like a certain level of rider to have a lactate test. Like we've also had people come in here that I've tested that are brand new to riding, and they're like, that's perfect, come in, know what your baseline is, and they're going to follow a training plan, and they just want to know where to start, and it's the perfect place for like literally any level of rider, because it will just make your training so much more effective and efficient. Yeah. And if you are a pro, or you have 30 hours a week to ride your bike, then you can afford to waste 2 or 3, 4 hours riding in the wrong zone, because you've got 20 other hours to ride. Yeah, I still don't think you can. Okay, go for it. Well, you can't wait. If you're a pro and you're a pro, you essentially want to be the best, right? All pros get there. Like nobody sort of accidentally falls into being there. You get there because you love training. You're like really good at it. You love your sport. Like you might have a certain amount of talent. I don't feel like I really had any talent for my sport. I just really enjoyed it and loved training. So then you end up becoming that, but you don't ever get there and think, well, I'm happy just being this middle level, like this is cool, that's fine, I'll just stay there. You want to be the best. Nobody gets there if they're not competitive and they don't want to be the best. Every single person who like makes sport their life and makes money out of it and makes a living out of it, you want to be the best there. So if you spend 2 hours wasting time training out of your 30 and someone else doesn't, you're not going to be the best. Yeah. Yeah, you're dead right. Like you're leaving improvements on the table.
Yeah.
If you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you waste 2 hours and you've only got 6 hours of training, that's like 33% of your total riding time.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you've got 2 hours versus 30 as a pro,
I get what you're saying, but essentially no one should waste any time training.
Sure, agreed. So yeah, if first of all, if you've got 6 hours a week to ride, make sure you know your exact training zones, because
that is number one.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I tested a lady the other week who came for that exact reason. She said like she had not very much time to train. She really liked going to the gym as well, so she had just like gave 2 hours a week to that, and the rest of the time she was cycling. So she would do like 4 rides a week. 3 of them would be like an hour, probably on the turbo because it's dark and stuff with work, and then 1 at the weekend that would be a bit longer. And she just wanted to make sure that time she was doing, she wasn't wasting it and she was getting the most out of it. And yeah, that was perfect.
Absolutely.
And her like zones were not where her FTP was. No. And she was aware of that because she couldn't.
Have you ever tested someone where their zones are precisely where their FTP was exactly? Yeah.
No.
It's always different.
But yeah, she came because she was like, some of these workouts on Zwift are just ridiculous and I just can't do it. And she said, there's no way that I could hold this power that it says for an hour.
Yeah.
And essentially as well, an FTP test, like, it's good at testing how much you can suffer, and some people won't suffer enough, and some people will suffer too much that after 20 minutes you're absolutely done and you can't. There's no way you could do that for an hour, and other people won't go hard enough. Whereas when you're having a lactate test, you can't lie about the lactate that's in your blood.
Yeah. There's no, like, the test is consistent.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about an FTP test, isn't it? Is that the conditions that you do the test in matter.
Yeah.
So one day you might be feeling great, one day you might be underfueled, one day you might be overfueled, one day you might be too hot, too cold, not enough oxygen in the room. Like, there's so many things that affect your performance on that specific day. Whereas a lactate threshold test being sub-maximal, it doesn't matter. Like, there are certain things like
if you're
coffee and
and if you're ill, but we'll always say, like, you know, don't eat this many hours before, don't have coffee. We'll always try, and if we're retesting people, we'll try and do it at the same time of day, all that kind of stuff.
Make it as consistent as possible.
Yeah.
There's way less variables than doing an FTP test at home. So that's definitely number 1. Number 2, if you've only got 6 hours a week to ride, make sure you know what you're doing before you get on the bike.
Yeah.
Because I've done this before as well. I don't have loads of time to ride normally. So I'll get on the bike because I've just happened to get this time free. I'll get on the bike for an hour and I'll literally start pedaling like I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm training for something, I want to do something specific and I just don't know. So having some sort of training plan or even a coach to set a session for you. Yeah,
I would say always have like a rough plan, and obviously with a lot of people who don't have much time, like, things can change, but have, like, at the start of the week, have a rough plan of even like, okay, if I get time to do 2 sessions this week, this is what I'm going to do in one of them and this is what I'm going to do in the other. And you might not know when that time's going to come up or when you're going to do it, but at least you know, right, I'm going to do like 1 threshold session, I'm going to do 1 over-under session, and I'm going to do 1 easy ride outside at, like, an aerobic ride. And just like have a little idea of what you're going to do, even if you don't know exactly what day you're going to do it on and when. Yeah. And going back to, I suppose, similar to what we're talking about with the training zones, but make sure that every ride isn't the same. Like, there's a variation in there. You're not always riding hard, always riding easy, or always riding in that middle ground. Like, you've got to have some sort of variation across the week, especially when you've not got as much time to ride. I think the other really important thing is that people often ride easy too hard. You need to do easy stuff easy, and you need to do hard stuff hard. And if you don't do the easy stuff really easy, then you can't do the hard stuff hard enough, so you're not going to get the same benefit from it. So if you're accumulating more fatigue than you need to when you're doing the easy work, you're not going to be able to get to that like 80, 90%. You're going to ride at 70% when you're doing the hard stuff. So again, like, you're wasting that time. It's not actually getting the benefit that you want. So there is a reason why you need to do that, and you need to like stick to that. Don't think, oh, well, I feel great today, so I'm just going to do this. Like, I'm just going to go a bit harder, because then you can't do the hard session. Yeah. Ultimately, like, I think everything we've brought up, it's basically about not wasting time. And making sure that every minute of your riding time is productive and it's targeting the areas that you want to target, rather than
rather than just completely building fatigue for no reason, or not going hard enough when you should be going hard and things like that. So making sure that each minute is spent doing what you want it to do is the key, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and also it doesn't have to be too complicated, although you need to do different things each week, or different things within the week, sorry. You don't have to change that dramatically from week to week. So you can do, if you do 4 things throughout the week and 2 of them are easy and one of them's a bit harder and one of them's really hard, you can keep doing that each week. Just change it very slightly. It doesn't need to be really, really complicated, weird, wonderful sessions. You can stick to doing 6 minutes on, 3 minutes off that many times, and then the next week do 8-4 or 2-1 or whatever. It doesn't need to be a really, really complicated system. You just, as long as you are consistent with it, and try and do a bit of everything. I actually think Zwift workouts are good if you're not sure where to start or pointing in the right direction. The one big problem I've got with Zwift workouts is that a lot of them are overcomplicated. They're just, they throw in some it'll be a threshold session, and then halfway through your rest in the middle you've got a 500 watt sprint for 15 seconds. No, either do a sprint session or do a threshold session. You don't need to do that.
It's just, I don't understand where what the reasoning is for it. And like I say, I think you can totally simplify it down. Just do 3 sets of this and 3 intervals of that. Just keep it like that and repeat it for 3 or 4 weeks. And you'll probably find by the end of the 4 weeks you're doing those intervals at a higher power.
It's not exactly.
It's not, rocket science. I think if people are struggling and listening to this and they're listening to it thinking, wow, you're describing me like I am that time crunched athlete, cyclist, and I really want to train for something, I would highly recommend heading over to our website at ukbikefit.com, having a look at lactate threshold testing and having a little read about it on there and see if it's something that might be beneficial to you, but also having a look at our training plans and our coaching, where our coach Ewan can support you and put in place a plan that is going to fit in with your life rather than having to do massive hours of riding. It's all about, well, what time have you got? Let's maximize that time first and then see if we can build the hours if we need to. But just maximizing the time that you've got is vital for improving without letting cycling have a bit of a it takes over your life a bit. So if you've got any thoughts or questions about what we've just spoken about, or any opinions about how best to spend your time when you've not got that much time to ride, please leave them in the comments down below. Really interested to see what people are thinking about this topic. Obviously we work with a lot of time crunched athletes, so it's always nice to know what you guys are thinking. And if you like this sort of conversation and want to see more of it and see more of our videos, like the video, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.